I thought that given all that has happened, that there are a couple of things that I want to say to you. Maybe there might be some things that you might want to say to me. So this morning was a resumption of I probably wouldn't say bi-weekly. We haven't had one of these press conferences for a little while because so much was happening in the interim. And I was out of the country. I was out of the country for a few days, so this is a resumption of our contact with the population through the media. I want this morning to touch on a couple of matters which are very current and of public interest. None of you in this room will be unaware of the fact that last week I took to the Parliament information which I consider of interest to the Parliament and the population. And that information has generated quite a number of reactions. The reason for me taking that information to the Parliament, and for whatever action I took before, was that I had looked at the information, and within the body, the content of the conversations, there were certain items, certain elements which seemed to corroborate what we knew before, vice versa. That the stories were corroborated by information or facts that were known. And on that basis, the existence of elements of corroboration contributed to that matter ended up in the Parliament. There has been a very strong reaction by the government, not surprisingly, to the matter. Actions of denial, actions of rectification. But so far, the government has not engaged any aspect of the corroboration. The government has confined itself to items that could result in dismissal of the whole content of the conversations as recorded in those documents. There's one item which for me was of interest subsequent to the debate, and that is that in the text of the documents which I read into the Hansard, there was a reference to an intention to be interested in the office of the Director of Public Prosecution. And the interest there was described in the context of wanting information from surveillance or bugs which apparently were either to be put or which already existed at the office of the Director of Public Prosecution. That was part of the text that was in the presentation in Parliament, simply from reading from the email. Subsequent to that, in the face of all the heat and light or lack thereof that passed after, The Guardian published a report indicating some knowledge or some information that the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution was in fact a place of interest to person or persons unknown, and that office was in fact bugged, and the bugs were discovered last year in November. That information was published last Thursday. I presume that one can understand that in my own office here, being a politician, it is easy for government spokespersons to describe my motive as being political, and that I have a certain amount of self-interest in advancing myself and my party's cause with respect to what went to the Parliament. Even though we are simply asking for proper investigation to determine whether in fact these items are of substance. However, I don't know that it is convenient and comfortable and acceptable to describe the Guardian as irresponsible, because I don't know that the Guardian is an irresponsible newspaper. And the fact that the Guardian would have published that story, I would like to be left with the opportunity to assume that there was some basis on which that story found its way to the front page of the Guardian. And against the background of all that has happened in the last year, especially in the last week, we are not prepared to dismiss a story which, on the face of it, seems to point to some disturbing developments at an office as sensitive as that of the Director of Public Prosecution. The information came out on Thursday after a very stormy week in the Parliament. The Prime Minister spoke on Friday night. She spoke at length about matters relating to what was in the Parliament, the emails, my own bringing of them to the Parliament, the government's responsibility and so on. And nowhere in the Prime Minister's discourse did she pay any attention to the fact that it has been reported that the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution was in fact the scene of electronic surveillance by person or persons unknown. The Attorney General also apparently appears to want to dismiss this. I simply want to draw to the attention of the country that these two officers are very senior members of the National Security Council. The Prime Minister chairs the National Security Council, and the Attorney General is a member of the National Security Council. And insofar as there is any information, I'm not even saying evidence, any information that the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution had been penetrated by criminals, because only criminals will do that. That's an act of criminality. Insofar as it has been reported in a major daily newspaper, especially against the background of what was in the Parliament, that the National Security Council personnel, in the form of the Prime Minister and the Attorney General, could be so dismissive of information of that nature, should be of concern to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Because one has to ask, do we need to be satisfied that the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution was not bound? And the answer has to be yes. And if it was determined to be bound, it immediately raises a series of other questions. Who would have wanted to do that? And for what purpose? And to what extent does this development point another dagger at the heart of the administration in this country, in this case, the administration of justice? Because one must understand what the role of the Director of Public Prosecution is. And that role is so important that it has been identified in the Constitution, created and protected as an independent body to ensure that justice in this country survives above all other attempts to have something else created. And therefore, we are saying at this office of the opposition that it is wholly unacceptable for the government, especially elements of the National Security Council, to attempt to dismiss in the most flippant way or to ignore information in the public domain that the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution has been done. And my concern flows from the following. I saw the Commissioner of Police saying that he knows nothing about it. But when I came into this office in 2010, there were two agencies of state which, to my knowledge, had the ability to do electronic surveillance and cleansing. One was the Police Special Branch, and the other was SORT. To the best of my knowledge, SORT have been disbanded by November of last year. And therefore, it is my assumption that whoever found the bugs in the DPP office, it was not SORT. I am then left to assume that is quite likely that it is the police special branch. If that is so, how then are we to take from the commissioner of police that he is unaware that his officers might have stumbled upon that development at the office of the Director of Public Prosecution? And that is why we need to clarify whether it is in fact so that that was the case. And even more troubling, I see officers of the National Security Council saying, I did not know, nobody told me. And I'm wondering whether this is yet another instance of an expression of lack of confidence by one arm of the state in another. Because if I found that my office was bugged, and I didn't tell certain persons because I was afraid that telling them would not improve my situation, then a lack of confidence between agencies in the state is something that the population should know about. This very office in which I am here, when I moved in here, I think it was on the first day, even before I moved in the office, the special branch was here, offering, and did in fact conduct the requisite cleansing of this office before I took up my post in this office. So we know about these things happening in offices of this nature. So we need to get clarity on what happened or did not happen at the office of the Director of Public Prosecution. So far, I have seen comments of no comment. In this kind of scenario, that ought not to be the end of the matter. Because if, as I have said, this matter was clarified one way or the other by the arms of the state under the Commissioner of Police, then I don't understand how the Commissioner of Police could be so far out of the loop as not to know whether or not this situation was one that attracted the attention of his officers. Now, we have to understand that we are not arriving from Mars in this matter, or matters of this nature. It was in this very country that certain elements got up one morning, put their arms and ammunition in a Wassa truck, drove into the town, however else they went, blew up the police headquarters, and took over the parliament, unbeknownst to the National Security Council. That inquiry is going on right now. So I take no comfort in the fact that a National Security Council today is flippantly feigning ignorance of the fact that the office of the Director of Public Prosecution could have been penetrated by criminal elements for cause and causes yet unknown. And if it is that they are prepared to dismiss that only because they believe that if they paid any attention, it would provide a further interest in the corroboration of the information which I put in the Parliament, then all I will say to that is that even if there was no matter of emails in the Parliament, this matter of penetration of the office of the DPP should have been of great concern to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And until this is clarified, we should all be very concerned. Taking some matters to the Parliament, I have spoken in the Parliament under the privilege of Parliament. Of course, there are views expressed on that as to whether in fact I should have used parliamentary privilege to have brought to the attention of the public matters which the public have been confirming to me that they prefer to have known. And arising out of that, I have seen the Prime Minister saying that the police should investigate me. I find that very interesting. Because whether you agree or not, what I have done to date is to discharge my responsibility as a member of Parliament, using the provision under the Constitution afforded me to raise a matter of concern to me. And if that matter is now of concern one way or the other to the people in the country, then I would have thought that I would have done my job. But it's interesting that the Prime Minister should be turning his attention not to what I've just mentioned at the DP's office or anywhere else, but to be indicating that the police should be investigating me, because all of a sudden my conduct is the issue. And I was telling you that last Thursday, in fact, the debate ended on Wednesday night. Thursday, my office received communication from DCP Richardson indicating that he would like to interview me. I am in this office this morning because I wasn't in here on Friday. And I have since indicated through my office to the office of DCP Richardson that I'm available to speak to him tomorrow if he's so interested. Because I am quite prepared to speak to any officer of state conducting any investigation where they believe I may give assistance to them. I am not sure what assistance I can give him, because I am not sure that the privilege of the Parliament extends elsewhere. However, I have made myself available to speak with him tomorrow. But in the interim, I have seen a comment from the Commissioner of Police indicating that the inquiry may be progressed or not progressed at a pace determined by persons who may or may not voluntarily cooperate with the investigators. Now I find that very worrisome, because the allegations are very serious. If one takes the emails seriously, of course the government does not. And what the population requires out of this is a very early treatment of the issue, so that if it is to be dispensed with, it should be dispensed with so that we can have confidence in our officers of state. Or if there is any aspect of problems in there, then the earlier we know, the better. So I'm a little disturbed at this idea that office holders could be too busy to cooperate with available investigators. I have already expressed my view on the quality of the investigation as designated as of today. Let me give you an example of how this country dealt with allegations against persons in public life before. And I do this against the background of all the revisionism that is taking place now, and all the attempt to make me the messenger, the subject of the outcome of this investigation, or the issues that were taken to the Parliament. And I will use my own experience as a parliamentarian on this matter. It was in November 2004, I think it was the first week of November 2004, in a budget debate in the Parliament, in a budget debate in 2004, that a member of the opposition, one named Ganga Singh, got up to the surprise of all and made specific allegations of criminal conduct against me, a minister of government at the time. I was a minister at the time, I was Minister of Housing at the time. And the allegations were that as a minister of planning, which I was before, I had involved myself in criminal conduct with ABD Lias and NH, where I was in receipt of benefits from that criminal conduct in Tobago. And those allegations didn't only implicate me, it implicated my wife, who was a person not in public life, conducting private business on her property in Tobago. That allegation was made on the Parliament floor, directed at me, and for all those who are now concerned about being scandalized, and those people who are scandalized now by the text of the email, I want to remind them that when Ganga Singh of the opposition got up in the parliament and raised those allegations about me with respect to Landgate and Scarborough Hospital, scandalizing me and my wife, I didn't cry foul. I accepted that if allegations were made against me as a person in public life, whatever the allegations were, doesn't matter how serious they were, I had a responsibility, if I was innocent as I was, to express my innocence and to cooperate fully with any investigation into the matter. That's what I did. The day after Ganga Singh made those revelations in the parliament, officers of the Integrity Commission appeared in the parliament and got possession of the Hansard copy. And based on that, the Integrity Commission opened an investigation into my conduct. I stood ready to cooperate with the Commission. The Commission did not cooperate with me. It resulted in a lawsuit, and you know the difference in that. The Commission directed this investigation to my wife, went into great detail of her personal life and her personal resources. Great detail. And of course, it was not just the Commission that investigated. The opposition, which was at the time populated by the Prime Minister, who is now in office, and at the time she was an opposition member, the Minister of Education, he was an opposition member. They demanded not just an integrity in public life investigation, they demanded a commission of inquiry. And they got that as well. They got the Ernestine Seeley inquiry into the allegations about Landgate and Scarborough Hospital. I can't recall anybody at the time asking Ganga Singh whether in fact he had checked to see whether Barrington Thomas had in fact worked at NH as he said he did. I can't recall if anybody at the time had said, if it turned out not to be true, that those who were asking for the investigation and those who brought it to the parliament should pay a price. What I do know, at the end of the day, after 3 investigations, one which was an integrity in public life investigation, which was the first one, another one which was the off-commission of inquiry, which came later, and of course, the Seeley inquiry, which was done in public. There was never any confirmation of that allegation. The Integrity Commission subsequently declared itself clear of any interest in any allegation to be supported as per what was said in 2004. The mover of that allegation in the parliament subsequently had to pay Mr. Elias $500,000 for defamation. And in my treatment with the Integrity Commission, who mishandled the matter legally, initially, I had to be compensated in the court to the tune of over $1 million. Interestingly enough, only 2 weeks ago in the parliament, a question was put to the Attorney General about how he had spent monies to lawyers of what he called the A-team. And he admitted that he had spent $40 million on a handful of lawyers who were investigating corruption. And when they asked him, what has he got in return for that expenditure? One of the items that he said was a deliverable, which was delivered from that expenditure, was on one of the items that he said was of interest under the investigation, and that was the same very Landgate matter, which was the subject of investigations and commissions of inquiry before. And he pointed out to the parliament that the Landgate matter was before the police. And that was news to me. And it was news to my wife. Because since 2004, as of today I'm speaking to you, No police officer has ever interviewed me or my wife on this matter. And since the Attorney General last week, 2 weeks ago, sorry, in explaining his $40 million expenditure to lawyers for investigating Landy and the police cooperating with that, whatever, today I'm calling on the Commissioner of Police to tell the population what he knows about this police investigation that is ongoing into Landgate, who is the investigating officer, and why, after almost 10 years, no police officer has spoken to me or my wife, who is the owner of the property. And I tell you this so you can put into context what is being said now against what is happening now in Trinidad and today. It is my view that the Attorney General has no problem in judging up every so often this landed comment for political purposes, even though they might very well know that there's no substance. And the person who can clarify that for us today is the Commissioner of Police. Now that the Attorney General has made reference to a police investigation in this matter, the Commissioner of Police must tell this country what he knows about a police investigation, and I'm simply confirming to you, the country, that no police officer of any rank has ever approached me on this matter, or my wife. So clearly, if there's an investigation taking place, there's some strange way of doing that. And one has to see that against the background of Mr. Jack Warner's comment just before he left office, that notwithstanding all that was being said about his troubles, nobody from the police service has ever asked him a question. So here we have so-called serious investigations into persons in public life. And this is the state of play. Now, this cannot be the way one would treat with allegations as contained in the script that was put before the Parliament. These are serious times requiring serious responses. I do not wish to prejudge anything. I simply want to draw to the attention of the public that we are suffering very seriously from either lack of confidence in or collapse of serious institutions of state. And if the motion of confidence accomplished nothing other than bringing this to the fore and pointing out to the people that we need answers not just to one question, but to a series of questions, then it would have served its purpose. The questions that are being raised, which are before the population now, require answers. Questions about the allegations of bugging the DPP office, questions about the leader of the opposition being under police investigation, questions about the National Security Council being unaware of penetration of the DPP office, questions as to who might have done that, questions as to who might want to benefit from that, questions as to who else is exposed to these kinds of developments. And against that background, we believe that the government is not a willing participant in clarifying these matters. What the government is interested in is muddying the water, demonizing the messenger, and hoping to escape unidentified. I noticed that there's a divergence of view as to the role of the Integrity Commission versus the role of the police. Bear in mind that we have already demonstrated that it is possible and sometimes desirable to have investigations go along parallel lines. In my own case, the investigation of the Integrity Commission had proceeded in parallel to an investigation of a commission of inquiry. In fact, during the commission of inquiry, lawyers for the accuser, of which there was one person, had attempted to bring into the Ernestine Seeley inquiry the polluted gossip of the Integrity Commission. And that commission had to rule that that could not be done because there were two parallel, separate channels of investigation which could not be cross-fertilized. This is done from the media. We have a very short memory in this country. And I don't know why the population is allowing itself to be so force-fed by misinformation from interested parties in the government. It is now being said that there is no role for the Integrity Commission in this matter. It is the view of the opposition that the Integrity Commission has the ability, once a commission is in place, to hire on its own volition and to pursue unimpeded, uninfluenced by the government, investigations into the conduct of any person, especially the people in public life. Any person who is in contact with such persons. And any issue of corruption under the Prevention of Corruption Act. And there are a lot of issues in those emails that the text point to issues which point to corruption. And what bothers me is that the two senior members of the National Security Council who are named in that text, accurately or otherwise, are out there for the first half of the week, from Monday to Friday, saying that the Integrity Commission has no legal power to get involved. And then shamelessly turns around on Saturday and says, I have always been saying up front that there should be an investigation and I have no problem with the Integrity Commission investigating it. When in fact what they tried to do was to condition the public away from an Integrity in Public Life Act power involved in this investigation. And I've seen it said by some elements of the media who are being influenced by the government's line of thought that the police investigation and the Integrity in Public Life investigation is one and the same. Now, if that is so, why then did Parliament bother to enact an Integrity in Public Life Act? If all that was required were the powers of the Police Service Act, which gives the police power to act in a certain way, if that is all that Parliament intended to be in place to treat with persons in public life who may have misconducted themselves, why then did Parliament bother to enact another law? And I dare say, put in that law, the Integrity in Public Life Act, superior powers for the investigators of the Integrity Commission. And I keep referring to the point of the Commission being able to expeditiously hire specialist skills, designate them investigators, and have people spoken to under oath. Not as the Commissioner of Police is indicating to us now, people who will make themselves available at their convenience, and who may or may not answer questions, who may or may not cooperate, and that will determine the outcome of the investigation. We are outfitted with the tools in this country to treat with this issue. It is whether we are willing to use the tools to ensure that the population gets satisfaction, that the issue is properly dealt with. And I take careful note of the fact that the government appears to be mortally afraid of an investigation that will go and flow to wherever the outcome is. That's the only reason why the government could be attempting to mislead you about the Integrity Commission's powers, to mislead you about the corroboration which caused me to bring this to the fore, and to be pretending not to notice the serious implications of the bugging of the office of the DPP. I draw all of this to the attention of the population so that you can come to your own conclusion. And no amount of demonizing me No amount of pretending that that is the issue will allow this population to escape from the reality that there may be a lot that is wrong in Trinidad and Tobago that is not being attended to, and that the inmates may be in charge of the asylum. And on that basis, I hold my peace for the moment, and I watch the development of these issues.
Dr. Ali, what, apart from the privileges afforded by the Parliament, what can you tell us made you so secure in the information that you received?
I am not secure in the information. If I was secure in the information, I would have done, I don't know what I've done. If I was secure in the information, I would have, at the very onset, opened my presentation by demanding the government's resignation the same day. Because the content of that, if any of it is true, then the government's resignation should be on the table. I didn't do that. As a matter of fact, I have not seen it being misprinted that I did that. And therefore, I'm simply saying it has been brought to the fore so it can be attended to. It is being attended to. I have issues with how well it is being attended to.
What about the a possible investigation into the DPP bugging issue? How do you think that should be carried out?
Well,
by the police?
One is beginning to get a little tired of the word investigation. But clearly, somebody has to provide clear answers. And the only way to provide clear answers is to inquire. There are people who must know the answers to these questions. One cannot just ignore the possible existence of that development. So the authorities will have to tell the population what the facts are about that. What is not acceptable is for the authorities to pretend that the issue is not there to be dealt with. Understood?
Dr. Ali, the Integrity Commission, under the Integrity and Public Life Act, we normally, the man in the street, when you think of integrity, you normally think of offences done for pecuniary gain, such as, a mismatch between the annual declaration form and any assets held. You have a big house and you're working for small money. So when you have offences that go beyond that, if there is an offence of a conspiracy to do injury to a person, could such an offence be investigated by a commission whose basis is pecuniary offences?
Well, your understanding of the powers and the role of the Integrity Commission there demonstrates that we are not familiar with Section 5 of the Act. Yes, what you've said, if you look at the Act, the first part of the Act speaks specifically to declarations and the accuracies and so on, and the contesting of declarations and the creation of tribunals and so on, and all that. The first part of the Act deals with this record of the assets of office holders. But Section 5 of the Act speaks specifically of any violation or suspected violation which may involve corruption in all its forms. And to give that power to the Commission, the Constitution was amended, Section 138, to allow the Commission to pursue, to find out whether any public officer designated as a person in public life would have engaged him or herself in any corrupt act as described in statutes such as the Prevention of Corruption Act. So if you go and read the Prevention of Corruption Act and see what it covers, the whole range, the complete gamut of corruption in all its forms, and you go back to the Integrity and Public Life Act and see that that act will have an interest in you if the Prevention of Corruption Act is triggered. you will realize that the Integrity Commission has very wide powers. And in the emails, you may also find that there was a reference to checks. There was reference to the purchase of freedom. So if these things are taken as part of the conduct or misconduct of public officials as named, then clearly their misconduct would be of interest as unacceptable corrupt practice to the Integrity Commission. So one has to familiarize oneself with the full scope of the power of the Integrity Commission, which is why I've asked the Commission to get senior counsel advice on this matter and to let the population know what senior counsel has told the Commission with respect to his power to intervene. And I tell you something else too. Parliament didn't only give the Commission the power. Parliament also knew that situations like this could develop, where the executive could take comfort in the fact that it has passed it to the police. And of course, I've just outlined to you some experiences of that nature. So Parliament gave the Integrity Commission the power to intervene on its own volition. So if you have a government or a person who is trying to cover, or who may have succeeded one way or the other, to cover what they have done wrong, Parliament has given the Integrity Commission the power to, on its own, without the prompting or calling by anyone, to go in and investigate a matter, even a matter which may have been dispensed with by the executive, who may have felt that they have sufficiently covered their tracks. That's what Parliament did. Parliament gave the Commission that power. And in this situation, where one can obviously see an inducement to not cooperate, a benefit to be had if it can be covered up, if there's something to cover up, then this is a classic case where the Commission may want to, on its own, go in and independently provide the thorough investigation as required. And you see, I've heard people say that Mr. Gordon and the two persons who are in the Commission, they don't have the skill or the whatever it takes to investigate. That's not how it goes. All the Commission has to do is to determine what investigative skills are required, who has those skills, and obtain them for a fee under their hand designated investigators. That's what happened in my case. They went to Canada and they hired a Canadian, designated him an investigator. And the minute he was designated an investigator by the Commission, he was then clothed with all the powers of that act, and would have then come to me and go to all other persons seeking information, could have had that under oath, and could make demands which you could not fail to cooperate with. That's the difference. There's a big difference. Compare that with the Commissioner of Police's position, that the police may not be able to advance this because people may not cooperate and they may be too busy to cooperate. Compare those two positions.
And the thing of having just one member of the Integrity Commission at the moment is, can he do anything, or does they have to wait how many months to appoint a new commission?
I couldn't comment on when a new commission would be appointed, but to answer the first part of your question, the chairman is in office and could guide the administrative arm of it, but the chairman, I think the commission's quorum is 3 persons. So without a quorum, the commission cannot initiate any new action, because it would, to initiate a new investigation, it has to be a decision of the commission, not of the chairman. And as long as there is not a quorum there to initiate, then the commission is hamstrung. And that's one of the reasons why this matter was brought to the fore. And I felt it was time that we have a commission, so that the commission could treat with this issue in the way that the public expects it to be treated with.
I missed the first part of your presentation because of the situation. But is this now a thrust for the opposition to push for this? Is it going to be like a main thrust to push for the Integrity Commission?
Well, from day one, we took the position that there are superior powers at the Integrity Commission to very quickly get the requisite independent skills to look at this matter. And a commission's report on this matter will have far more credibility than a report coming from officers who are beholden to the government, as they are at the moment. And that was our position from day one. As I said before, we do have the tools in our toolkit. Whether we as a people have the will to do it is another story. And there were those who have been responding by saying the opposite, but over days have been changing their position to accepting that the commission could be an agency. And I'm going further. I'm saying notwithstanding what the government does, the commission must, on its own, investigate this matter.
But I'm saying, to fill the vacancies in the commission, will the opposition now be lobbying? Will it be like a campaign of your thrust, opposition's thrust to fill these vacancies?
We don't think we need to do that. We think that the office holders whose responsibility it is to put us in a position to discharge these duties would be cognizant of what is going on. I have no doubt, I've seen it said from President's House that steps are being taken. I don't want to comment on those matters at this time. But what I can say is that the process involves consultation with the opposition, and those consultations have not yet taken place.
Can I ask, has TCP Richardson replied to you with regards to meeting tomorrow?
I'm still waiting on I have made myself available, and I'm waiting acceptance of that availability.
Are you still of the
But I simply want to make it quite clear for those who believe that this meeting with Mr. Richardson is somehow advancing the investigation. I have said all that I have to say on the content of the matter in the Parliament. I'm not the recipient of those emails as email directed to me. I'm not a witness to any of that. So I'm keen to find out what Mr. Richardson wants to talk to me about.
Are you still of the view that the police service would not be the right body to investigate this matter?
I'm concerned that if it is left simply to the executive of the police service, whatever they come up with, given the circumstances that exist now, there will be a strong body, including my own thoughts, that the level of confidence that one should repose in that investigation would not be there. And I have gone public with my own experience with DCP Richardson and his willingness to cooperate with the government when the government was looking for a way out with respect to the assassination plot. It was my view then, and I had a press conference on the matter on the very same day. I had the press in my office in Parliament after I met with DCP Richardson, and I told the country this thing was a hoax, and I was concerned that the independence of the police was being compromised by providing what would appear to be support for a political fiasco which the government had created. I was concerned then that people had lost their freedom. People were incarcerated by the police, whose action caused them to be arrested when there was no evidence sufficient to charge them. And DCP Richardson was in fact the person who brought that to me as an explanation of the Prime Minister's predicament at that time. So I hold no other view. That this cannot be allowed to be a repeat of that.
We've also seen where in the past 3 years the government has been able to tap dance around several major issues. Well, even with the Section 34, we've seen that they reacted after yourself and the MSG and several other people came together with a massive public upset and the outcry from the public. That's when they reacted. Do you see this heading along the same vein?
Well, I tell you one thing. The opposition is not going to allow the government to minimize these developments. You're quite right. when the outrage was generated, when we discovered what happened with respect to the surreptitious proclamation of Section 34, and I called the population to demonstrate its objection on the street, the government's first response was that I was wasting my time, and I'd be lucky if 34 persons came out. However, by the time they were under public pressure, they spun it around to say, we move with alacrity to the parliament to deal with it. And the Prime Minister was receiving kudos and accolades from our colleagues for waking up in the morning at 7 o'clock and giving instructions to let's go to the parliament and repeal it. And we took note of the fact that as head of the government, she came to the parliament and did not have a word to say. I simply want to ask the people of Trinidad and Tobago, could you imagine in the Parliament of Canada, the UK, New Zealand, Nigeria, India, that something like that could have happened? And the Prime Minister is forced to come to Parliament to repeal something which she had done, and for which there were serious outstanding answers which were not forthcoming. And the Prime Minister of those countries could have sat in the Parliament and not say anything in that debate. Do you think the people of those countries would have accepted that? And these are the questions we have to ask ourselves if we're serious. Okay, thank you very much for coming.